the highest and best use issue. And we'll have a lot of folks in my class, because I teach a lot of live classes in Nashville and throughout Tennessee, for that matter. And I'll have students say, we need more highest and best use discussion, because they're coming in and they're buying what doesn't appear to be cheap homes.
Right.
And they're knocking them down and building 3 or 4 homes on the lot where there was one previously. They call them tall and skinnies.
Tall and skinny.
Tall and skinny. So they'll put 3 tall and skinnies where there was one house prior to that.
Sure.
So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's all about land management and taking care of the masses, isn't it? So
oh, absolutely. The highest and best use here in New York, one of the challenges is that we've always had affordable housing issues, but it's really this last development boom, really since the financial crisis, with massive capital available at, you have global investors chasing higher returns, and so there's all this capital for development. The cities are really, have been rejuvenated, but the product is always skewed, whether it's rental or new development, towards the higher end, so to speak. Maybe not the craziness like we have in New York, where, we have a $250 million condo unit that's going to close pretty soon, and a couple of other, $100 million units in the pipeline. So, that's not the norm, but basically most of the product here is skewed over $1 million, and that's a big number for mere mortals, I guess.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Jonathan, we went ahead. Ben is kind of controlling things down. I hate being out of control, but but Ben is kind of steering the ship today. And he went ahead and hit the live broadcast button. So we've got some viewers out there already that are kind of watching what we're doing. Okay. And hello to all you that are on a little early watching us. Jonathan and I are just chatting a little bit while we're waiting for the official start time at 10 o'clock. But I wanted to let him know that we're on, and welcome you if you're already viewing. We're just chatting for a little bit. We're not actually in the mode to get going on the topic yet. So.
Although everything we're going to say in the next 9 minutes is far more important than the webinar.
You may have more fun in the next 9 minutes than you do in the next 60 minutes, right? You never know. I mean,
right.
Hey, it's it's kind of the behind the scenes look, or kind of the sneak peek, if you will.
That's right.
So what's your week looking like? I know you're a very busy man. And again, I'd like to thank you very much for kind of participating, especially on short notice. What you got going on this week and next week?
Well, one of the things actually I'm going to discuss in the hour, but one of the things that has happened to me is I've sort of morphed into not only being an appraiser, but really over the last 24 years, I do a lot of market research and publish it. And I have a big report on Manhattan coming out covering the second quarter next week, 4th of July week. And so we're just sort of putting everything together today and tomorrow, getting ready for launch day on Tuesday. So that's pretty cool. And then the other thing I'm working on is I'm actually in about 2 weeks, I'm starting to teach market analysis at Columbia University in Manhattan. Very nice. So I'm in theory, I'm going to be respectable going forward as a professor of market analysis. I have about 130 students in the class, and it's sort of a half semester because it's summer. And this will be my first one, and hopefully it'll go well and no tomatoes will be thrown, and then I'll keep my connection with the university.
Well, congratulations! That's
so exciting. I'm excited about it. And when I told my parents, it was funny because my dad was so excited that he kept saying things like, "That is so respectable," and I just kept thinking to myself, Does that mean that I wasn't before? Like my own father?
I finally made it, Dad. I
I've
love
only been
it.
appraising for 32 years, and now I'm doing this. And
Yeah, son, you finally got a real job, right?
exactly. So that's exciting. But
Oh, I love it.
and
Well,
then
congratulations.
tomorrow on every Friday, I sit down in the morning. So tomorrow morning, I sit down and for like 5 hours, I write my weekly housing notes that are released at 2 p.m. Eastern time every week. And I haven't missed a week yet. I've taken, it's been like, I think it's been maybe a little over 3 or 3.5 years that I haven't missed a week.
Oh, that's great.
It's very cathartic. You sit down and you sort of purge yourself of all the stuff you've collected or thoughts you've had of the week, and you kind of exhaust yourself of that. And then next Monday is a new week and you start all over again.
That's amazing. Yeah, I just signed up for that, by the way. I've seen some of your writings over the last year or so. And I think on LinkedIn and different places, I see some of that stuff published, and I followed some of that. But I got on your site last night and again this morning and actually signed up for that. So I'm excited about that. I know you have a little section in those housing notes called Appraiserville, I believe that's what you call that. And it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. So when we get started here, we'll save that for about 5 minutes. But when we get started here, certainly let the viewers know if they're interested in signing up for that, how to go about doing that, because you do provide a lot of great information. And I wasn't aware that came out weekly. That's quite an endeavor for you to do that every week.
Well, it's funny because in summer of 2005, when I saw the housing bubble developing and I could see things weren't going to probably end up in a good place. And and I was blogging. I started blogging August 2005. My blog is called Matrix. It's still around, but I really have shifted my emphasis. But I used to post like 4 to 5 posts a day, and I remember my wife, who's my business partner also, and my sister said, "Do you get paid for that?" I'm like, well, maybe indirectly in terms of being, it's like doing homework on your career. Is the way I always looked at it. So.
I've taught live classes for many, many years. And I tell people, you're not going to make a lot of money as an instructor. I mean, you either have a heart of that or not, and a passion for that. But I tell you what it has done for me. I think it's made me a better appraiser because, when I quote these Fannie Mae guidelines or I'm talking about FHA protocol or something like that, I've got to kind of know what it is.
Exactly.
And it certainly doesn't mean I know everything. I have a thirst for knowledge and I will be a learner the rest of my life. But I think it's actually made me a better appraiser because I've got to look that stuff up.
Right.
And when a student asks me, absolutely. And when a student asks me a question that I don't know the answer, I admit, I'm sorry, I probably should, but I don't know the answer. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find that answer for you. And what it's going to do for me, it's going to educate. It's going to be an education lesson for me. So it's an opportunity for me to learn. And I'm always excited about that. So I know your writings, if you're not getting paid, that's tough, but there's gotta be a tremendous amount of benefit in other ways.
Absolutely. Did you have any background in radio? Because you have a good voice.
No. I mean, I
always tease Phil Crawford has a radio show and he has a smooth, silky voice. There's certain people that just sound really good on the radio, and your voice is very easy to process.
Well, I appreciate that. My brother is an actor, and he's roped me in a couple of times to a couple of little things. And then when I was in Chicago, I did do a little bit of mobile DJ stuff there for a while. Okay. So that was a lot of fun, and that was back when we actually were spinning vinyl, in those days. So we had a lot of fun with that. So we're a couple of minutes away. We're gonna hold off just another minute or two before we dive into the weeds here with this hot topic, and it is kind of a hot topic, if you will. We were talking a minute ago how appraisers and human beings, for that matter, resist change, and I think that's very, very evident. Do you see a lot of pushback? I mean, not just with subject matter today, but when there's anything unveiled. Remember when the 1004 MC form came out?
Sure.
And I talk about when the new form came out, and that was in 2005. So,
right.
So it's not a new form anymore, is it? But
right.
It seems like appraisers went nuts. We thought the sky was falling. Is that your experience anytime there's some kind of change in the industry?
Well, I think, I think it's more about minor things and surprisingly less about major things, because we like to see the sort of details very specific. So I have a heaping bowl full of righteous indignation that I dig up when I see something that I don't necessarily agree with, and then I have to step back and catch my breath.
Right.
And usually you figure it out, but the initial response, and there's reasons behind that, which I can talk about in our session.
Yeah, I remember being at an instructor workshop many, many years ago, and a USPAP instructor actually stood up and he said, "I love USPAP Day because I love to put the fear of God in them." And I just sat there for a minute and I thought, wait a minute, is that what we're supposed to be doing? So, when I teach USPAP, you got to go over the curriculum. You have to go over what you're supposed to do as an AQB certified USPAP instructor. But boy, I like to dig into those areas where maybe they've been glided over in the past. You can actually do an oral appraisal report.
Right.
And folks don't recognize that. And you could do a restricted appraisal report. The foundation did a good job. They actually put samples in the most recent 7-hour student update book at the back to give you a sample of restricted. And one of them is on commercial. So I'm glad they did that, because we as appraisers, I tell folks that we as appraisers can do just about anything with scope of work, an extraordinary assumption, hypothetical condition. You as a practitioner can do almost anything.
Right.
Now, I didn't say you could do anything.
Right.
I said you could do almost
anything.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Jonathan, we are at the 10 o'clock mark, so let's go ahead and kick this off. We've got several viewers already on and more clicking in minute by minute. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, appraisers. I'd like to welcome everyone that's already tuned in. And if you're clicking in now, you're joining us at the exact precise time that we're kicking this off. I'm super excited today to have a great guest on board. We're going to have a lot of fun today, and hopefully you'll walk away with some information. My name is Bryan Reynolds. This is the Appraisal Report webinar, and it is hosted based from Appraiser eLearning. So I'd like to welcome everyone. And now I'd like to welcome my special guest, Mr. Jonathan Miller. He is a certified appraiser out of New York. And Jonathan, if you don't mind, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and if you don't mind, maybe how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. So thank you for having me, first of all, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Just to reconnect with, or to provide proof that I am in New York, if you look over my shoulder in the window through the fog, you can see the Empire State Building. So that's not a picture, that's the actual Empire State Building. So I'm right in the thick of Midtown Manhattan. I've been an appraiser for 32 years, which is kind of scary. My company, co-founded with and run by my wife, my sister, and I, we have an appraisal practice in the middle of Manhattan covering New York City and then the outlying regions. I also publish a series of market reports on about 30 different housing markets across the country. You can find any information about me, or it could be, I'm telling you how to avoid me, is don't go to millersamuel.com is my website. And just one other thing is that if you know me, my real platform in terms of, communicating, outside of my office is my weekly housing notes, which are released at 2 p.m. Eastern time every Friday. I've been doing it for 3.5 years, haven't missed a week. I morphed from blogging heavily to this platform, and we have a subset in my housing notes called Appraiserville. And I do a lot of try to present things of the week that were issues or timely, and that's it. So millersamuel.com is the best way to reach me.
Yeah, and for our viewers, you need to check that out. I've seen several of his writings. It's a lot of great insight, and one of the reasons I like having him on our webinars. And he's a little modest. He's been on. You've been on a lot of shows as well. You're kind of a TV star, aren't you?
Well, I'm a legend in my own mind, but no, all I am, I don't have any PR. All I am, and what I think all of the appraisers that are watching this or will watch this, is we have a lot of information to share, and we're the best people to share it. We're not selling anything. We're not hawking anything. We're neutral market observers, and I think that is lost on the public. We're overshadowed by the brokerage community. And I think there's a real opportunity in the future for appraisers to leverage their expertise into other things, and we're going to touch on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before we get too far into the show, I would like to remind our viewers that this is being brought to you by Appraiser eLearning, and we have a YouTube channel. The best way to stay in touch with us is to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You're going to be a subscriber, and you're going to see anytime we put a webinar on. By the way, we do offer this free webinar, the Appraisal Report webinar, once a month, free of charge, and it is typically the fourth Thursday of every month. So we'd like to welcome you and ask you to come back and see us again sometime. We also record these webinars. So if you've got an order that you've got to get to this afternoon and you've got to drive and need to jump off of here, we certainly understand. This will be recorded so that you could come back at a later time and check out the rest of the broadcast. So we do that. I'd like to make a little quick disclaimer and disclosure. So the views, comments, statements, and opinions of our guests are not necessarily the same as your host, Bryan S. Reynolds, or Appraiser eLearning. We strive to provide you the best, most relevant information available. However, I'm not perfect. And as USPAP says, perfection is impossible to attain, and competency does not require perfection. Viewers are encouraged to verify all information through an independent, authoritative source. So now that we got kind of our business out of the way, let's just jump in here, Jonathan. By the way, if you are viewing this and you have any questions, the one thing that we really pride ourselves on is that we allow you to participate in this webinar. So if you have a question or if you have a statement or if you want to complain about something, you can actually type in a question, send it over, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we possibly can during the broadcast. And so that's something that's a little unique about us. A lot of webinars do not allow you to ask questions live. They'll want the questions in advance, or they simply won't take any questions. And we like to be able to communicate with our viewers. So feel free to ask a question, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. So Jonathan, before we get into, some of these alternative appraisal options, I guess you could call them, I want to just talk real briefly about the PIWs, if you will, and the appraisal waivers. And we had a webinar last month talking about the results of that TriStar Bank's request to get an appraisal waiver for the entire year of 2018. And fortunately for appraisers, and I want to thank appraisers that participated, because I think that kind of got stopped as a result of, or at least in part, by all the appraisers that got involved. So that was stopped, which is a good thing for us. And I want
to just point out, Bryan, that sure, with the TriStar event, like that's how our industry is supposed to behave, where we gather together and solve a problem. And what I thought was fascinating about, the sort of the preposterous notion that there weren't enough appraisers in their market, when that's easily verifiable just on the register, and just people in the market that said, I'd be happy to work for them, is the idea that the bank actually locked its Twitter account. So they're on Twitter, but they were being besieged by appraisers, that they actually locked their account to prevent people from comment. And I thought, wow, this is really distorted. I don't know if people realize that, but anyway,
wow,
I thought
that's amazing.
So I was very proud of the industry for reacting properly and affecting change.
And I totally agree. Appraisers need to get involved. I mean, right, we're independent by definition. We act independently, and it's just hard for appraisers to come together. But guys, you got to get involved. If you care about your profession, you have to get involved. That could have resulted in really bad things for appraisers if that went through.
Absolutely. And just another point to that is that I think over the last couple of years, what's really changed in the profession, I think, we're used to being beaten up because we've never really been able to defend ourselves. We don't have the power or financial wherewithal like a national lender does or large institutions. And we've basically just, been sort of hit over the head for most of our careers and not said anything. And that's all changing. And it's changing right now as we speak. So that's why I'm very optimistic about the future. It's just going to take a different form. And that's, I think, what we're going to talk about.
Right. Yeah, we definitely are going to see some change. I don't think there's any question about that. And appraisers better be ready for that. You do things differently today than you did even 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And guess what? You're going to be doing things different in another year or two from now, if not sooner. So the appraisal landscape is going to look a whole lot different in the near future than what it looks like today. So you better be ready for that. Hey, Jonathan, on that, we talked about TriStar not being successful. The Oklahoma bank rescinded their request.
Correct.
But Fannie Mae is doing waivers. I mean, they have been for a while. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, we have certain instances where if the criteria is in place that Fannie Mae will buy a loan from a bank, whereas the bank did not secure an appraisal for the real estate that is the collateral for that debt. And my understanding is they will buy that without recourse. So, gosh, the bank says, sign me up, for crying out loud. What are your thoughts? Is this a real problem area? Do appraisers need to be fearful of this thing called the PIW?
Well, first of all, when it first came out, it was inspection waiver, really. The I was inspection, and they're changing the name to appraiser because let's be clear, that's what it is.
Exactly.
So a couple of thoughts on that. Let me just step back take one step back just to sort of provide the context for it. Is that when you look at what market you're in and where you're going and what you're thinking about and what the challenges that you're going to face. What I believe is we're exiting the traditional we've already exited the traditional appraisal world that many of us, especially with our, in our age and how long we've been active, like that world is gone. And changed in the way that it was unchanged for decades or more than decades, and we're right now in what I call the bright and shiny object phase, which is there's a commoditization attempt on our profession through many products or lack of products, like waiving appraisals, and I'll answer your question eventually before the end of the podcast or the interview. But let's just say that I'm taking the long route. But there's lots of other products. There's data mining type things. There's hybrids. There's evaluations. There's a lot of things being tested out in order to commoditize what has long been touted as a profession. And so those are the bright and shiny objects that I think many people are zeroed in on. And I contend that in much of that, the sort of the cow, I don't know if this is said in Tennessee, I'm a New Yorker, but the cow is let out of the barn, so to speak. Like there's going to be these products, there's going to be hybrids, but the question is whether the vast majority of the industry embraces it or looks for other opportunities to leverage their expertise. And I really think that that's what we want to focus on as far as, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. But the thing that I want to address with the waived appraisals is that represents a tremendous. So on one side, yes, it is weird to think that a homeowner buying a home, they get to the closing table and they say, "Hey, where's the appraisal?" and there isn't one, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
believe me, it's, you know, I'm not on board with that, but I understand it. And right now, I mean, I understand what their thinking is. I don't agree with it, but the thinking is, you know, they have all these criteria that make this a low risk, you know,
Sure.
a procedure on their part. The thing is, right now, the numbers in terms of their I don't know, their space in the GSE mortgage pool is hovering a little, you know, plus or minus 10%. I've heard as high as 12. I've been presented as 10, various flavors of it. And many elements of this have existed, like you said, for years, but
Sure.
it's sort of like being ramped up. And then we have the slippery slope discussion, which is, well, if it's 10 now, next year it's going to be 20.
Right. Right. That's the concern.
And so, you know, before we went on air here, so to speak, you brought up this idea of, you know, how we as appraisers we like to complain. Like in my heart, I have a healthy batch of righteous indignation ready to throw at somebody at any time, right?
Right.
But I
Right.
think the reason why we feel, the profession reacts that way, is because we've never been at the table. Like, we've always been a profession where everybody makes the decisions for us and has no influence. Or not no influence, but limited influence, because we don't have the resources.
Right.
We're a mom and pop industry as a stereotype. You know, some certainly are large firms out there, but generally speaking, it's very small. We don't have the wherewithal. And I think now, you know, some of that is changing. And what's been interesting is with this waiver appraisal, we've seen the concept. This is being pitched constantly now by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Like, they're trying to be much more transparent. It doesn't make it right, but you're seeing a lot more discussion about it, and that itself is somewhat positive. So we're not blindsided every 5 minutes by something new, but it still doesn't make it right. And I think, you know, I don't think there's a chance in, you know, swear word obliterated here, that this will go away. I think it's embedded.
Yeah.
In the risk models that the GSEs are, you know, in love with or comfortable with. You know, it's going to be interesting because in 2020, we're probably, you know, and who knows, but, you know, the probability of recession is pretty high. We've had 3 or 3.5 years of rapid homes price growth, and we have lots of confidence because it's easy to be in the housing market because we have limited supply. You know, we have although we're seeing sales start to level off because of affordability and lack of inventory, but really, you know, it's not this sort of crazy bubble that we had in the last cycle. It's certainly overheated. So what happens when things cool off? And so, you know, I take some comfort in thinking, well, you know, we've seen this show before. It's
Sure.
not the same. It's not the same design. It's something different. Credit is generally more, you know, the opposite. It's not, do you need a pulse to get a mortgage, therefore ordering an appraisal?
Right.
It's something a lot more rigid and irrational, but still, you know, it's of concern. So I'm not really answering the question, but I'm saying it's there. I don't think it's going away. And
yeah, neither do I.
And so let's focus on other things, and also, you know, encouraging discussion about keeping it from expanding. Like, it is weird to think that these GSEs are, you know, they're in receivership, and they're, you know, in order for them to expand you know, the waiver concept, they really have to expand their credit box and take more risks, which is kind of a weird position for somebody that's in receivership. So
yeah, you know, and many times you know, I talk about this stuff a lot. You think we would learn our lesson. We had the housing crisis, and, you know, it's hard to believe that's been 10 years.
It's amazing.
It seems like it was a year ago.
I know.
And and obviously lenders were doing things that that's laughable now, that we talk about.
You can't imagine it today.
Stated income.
Right.
You know, we're not going to check. We're not going to check. Just tell me how much you make, you know?
Right.
And if you look back even a few years prior to that, we had the savings and loan crisis,
right,
when we had to create the RTC to clean up that mess.
Right.
And you would think that we would learn. And the thing that just amazes me, that this is the biggest asset that most Americans will ever have, right? Their house.
Right.
And you're gonna lend money without checking or verifying, or at least getting an idea of what this thing's worth. And many years ago, it seems like the banks were more concerned with the collateral. You know,
Right.
we were a collateral-based lending society. And somewhere along the way, we went from a collateral-based lending society
to
credit-based lending
Right.
society. Right. And I thought after the housing crisis in 2008, maybe we'd come back or be a little combination there together. But the PIWs are here, and I'm with you. I don't think they're going to go away. I know
but I think we should be very vocal in terms of, I don't know how you shame a GSE, but I just think that, you know, there has to be a reality check. And, you know, one of the comments when I always think about this, you know, why do we have economic cycles? Why do we have housing cycles? It's because of the human component. We are just naturally, we're forgetful about the recent past, and we screw things up. We're really good at screwing things up, and not seeing, you know, history. You know, ironically, our profession, you know, a heavy part of our analysis is historical. Obviously, we look at contracts and listings, you know, what's happening in the future, but there's also a lot of historical as a baseline. Right. But in the real world of the mortgage process, historical lessons are, you know, being, ignored or not paid attention to. The other
good point, very good point.
And actually, you know, even before our profession became much more outspoken in the last couple of years, like we had the quote unquote appraisal shortage recently, and that was, you know, there's always been an issue with a shortage of appraisals in rural areas, but it was sort of, you know, we had a refi boom that sort of tipped the balance, and the AMC industry essentially ran out of people that were willing to work for 50 cents on the dollar. But the profession rose up and said, no, that's actually not true. And now that issue is sort of moved away. The real hot topics that are coming up right now that you had announced, and you know, are hybrids,
right,
evaluations. And if you don't mind, I'd love to give you sort of a 50-cent overview on my take on that, because it's a lot. There's a lot of discussion about this.
Yeah, but before we jump right to the hybrids, let's talk real quick. You know, I got in this business many years ago, and I was taught that an appraisal was a 1004 form with all the addenda, with the map, with the little rub-on arrows.
Yeah.
With the photographs of the subject, the photos of the comps, copy of the deed, right? And don't forget a copy of your license and the E&O coverage, right? You know, that was the appraisal. And guys, that wasn't the appraisal. That was the appraisal report.
Right.
It was a specific report for a specific reason. And we, you know, I did 2 appraisals last week for homeowners, potential buyers. They were buying real estate, and both of them were cash transactions. They did not need an appraisal. They wanted an appraisal. They wanted to know if they were making a good decision. And one of them, I did not get a copy of the contract, and I was fine with that. Actually, I know USPAP requires us to analyze it, so on and so forth.
Well, you have to attempt to get the contract, right?
That's exactly right. You know, if it's available in the normal course of business, you have to state what your actions were to try to secure a copy, all that good stuff. But anyway, there are other options out there, and there are folks in the public that genuinely want to know what these properties are worth. So, you know, it was nice to do that. But anyway, what I wanted to kind of slide in here with, Jonathan, is I started out doing the 1004s, and that's all I did. Now, you know, the 2 that I did last week One was a restricted appraisal report, and then one they did want to see the analysis and whatnot. But I do a lot of oral appraisal reports, and I think a lot of appraisers have resisted that just because they've never done one before. They don't understand.
Sure.
But we went from 1004s to the drive-bys, the 2055, and appraisers resisted those. And guys, back in the day, I was that guy. I was like, I got to see it, smell it, touch it, feel it. If I'm going to sign my name to something,
Right.
I've got to see, right? And I finally got over that and realized there are times in which maybe you can do something different. So then we went from the 2055s, where most appraisers pushed back, to we went to a desktop model. And, appraisers didn't like that, and they complain about that. And now we're kind of even in new waters, or relatively new, uncharted waters, where we talk about these hybrids. And we're talking about, when I say that, let me just define what my meaning for that is.
Sure.
Is that you're going to be doing a desktop. You don't leave your office, but you're actually getting information from someone else. And many times the client will hire a realtor or someone like that to go out and drive by the property, photograph it, maybe give some sort of description, and then they send that information to the appraiser, that the appraiser can rely on that information. And boy, that's what creates a lot of controversy. So
sure,
that's where we're at, and that's what I wanted to kind of slide in step by step, and then get your thoughts on that. What do you know? What do you hear? What do you think on this new type of appraisal option?
So we're still, as I said, in the bright and shiny object period. So this is new, and obviously, and what the challenge of it is, first of all, at least according to several of the insurance carriers for E&O, is that your liability is the same in a hybrid that it is in a full inspection where you do it. So that becomes a business decision for you whether you want to do that. The problem is that, at least right now, there's no standardization. There's no standards for inspections. And so it can't be compared with a trainee situation in your office. Like, you have a trainee, they're going out, they're inspecting a property. You know this person, you hired this person, you know their experience in the area. And so they're coming back to the office and they're working on the appraisal, and you're helping them. That is not the same thing. This is a whole, like, you don't interact with the inspector.
You have a little bit of supervision over the trainee, and actually you're responsible for the trainee.
Correct.
I don't have any supervision of real estate agent Joe going out to look at this property.
You don't even know, you don't know any, you could also not, and I'm not trying to be like, I'm not giving you my righteous indignation speech here about, I'd never,
Sure.
This is going to, this is not going away either. Right. Because there is a commoditization of our industry where the powers that be, I think what appraisers can do is, what's the responsible thing to do is to understand what your exposure is. And there's always people on all ends of the spectrum. You have the people at one end that nothing new, I won't touch anything. And then you have the people at the other end saying, I'm going to do everything. It's another $50 or whatever it is, or $10 or whatever the inspection. I have no idea. Right. And the idea is like faster, cheaper, but it degrades the quality. And that's a decision of whether you want to participate in that and impact the industry in the long run. I look at all this stuff as, from my own personal perspective, is anything I do like that damages what I do for a living. It's the same discussion we'll have about evaluations, but that's me, right? That's my decision as a business person, and as a I don't want to base my value on, I'd rather do a drive-by.
Right.
Than I would rely on, because the like liability administrators, I just heard a presentation said it's the same risk.
Sure. Let me interject something there, because I want to get your thoughts on this. So I believe I heard you say that you're making the business decision that you wouldn't be interested in doing that type of product, right?
Correct.
If we think about for a minute, and I certainly don't have the answers.
Yeah.
I don't have any answers, but if we think about it for a minute, and we think about when you do an appraisal of a new construction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you drove by that property, Jonathan, you would see dirt. Okay. There's nothing there. You get plans and specifications from a builder. And most of the appraiser community that's watching right now probably does these, right?
Sure.
They do new constructions. They do those off plans and specifications because we were taught that we could do those. And we have a certain comfort level of doing those. And we have plans and specifications. And I understand that you see that the builder is building this size house with this type of construction materials and how many bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and you feel good about that. But do builders ever deviate from plans and specs?
Of course.
I mean, almost every house built has some deviation from plans and specs. So I guess my question is, if appraisers are comfortable with relying on those plans and specifications, I mean, there's not a house there. There's dirt there. Mm-hmm. And you're going to develop an opinion and sign your name based on those plans and specifications. And you reserve the right that if that information is not correct, or if they don't build to that standard, if you will, that you reserve the right to change your opinion, obviously. Why couldn't we take that same thought process for these products?
So you certainly can. I mean, some people that are doing them certainly have already done that. My issue is that if this guy is a or man or woman, whatever, that's inspecting the property, I mean, it's like there isn't a certification, there isn't a bullseye in this person's back like there is for the architect that signed off on the plans. That the architect, the molding in the living room was not as wide as what was specified. Okay, there's a level of precision that appraising doesn't necessarily have. That's not going to make a difference, but they're not going to miss a room. Right. The architect isn't going to miss a room or miss something. So for me, it's a business decision where I feel that it's a business decision, but when I say business, I mean it affects my brand or who I see myself in the field. It becomes, is it worth it for you? The problem with this is that you have somebody inspecting that you don't know. You don't know if it's, I mean, appraisers screw up all the time. I
Sure.
certainly screw up.
Me
People
too.
screw up. But you don't know they screwed up, and you don't have any recourse, or there's nothing. It's just, here's the metrics of the house. Here's the finishes. Here are some pictures, and let me go to town. For some people, they're comfortable with that. I certainly am comfortable with doing drive-bys. My problem is that you have now a new profession, sort of. It's not a home inspector,
right?
It's just an inspector. Think of the parallel here. You do an appraisal for an AMC, and a 19-year-old calls you chomping on gum, telling you that you didn't do something correctly. I feel like it's the same thing. It's sort of like there's an incompetence there, and what it does, at least for me, when I'm an appraiser, and again, I don't have a problem with drive-bys, but this is sort of this Wild West, and maybe there'll be standardization, and maybe that'll change. But in its present, and I'm not saying it'll never work. I'm just saying right now, I'm not comfortable because it's not standardized. The other reality is, and this is, I think, the bigger reality to most appraisers on the hybrids, is that what it does is when you peel back the onion, it really shows how much the valuation part of the hybrid is interpreted, or what the value of that, of the value of the valuation part of the hybrid, what it actually is, what the client is willing to pay. And what I find with a hybrid is just same idea with an evaluation, is that it's peanuts in terms of what you actually bring to the table. And in many cases, it's like this sort of teenager running through a house, measuring and taking pictures, or you don't know what their background is. That comp, or the amount they save, is equivalent to the valuation part, which to me is the vast majority of the reason for the appraisal to begin with. So there's like a disconnect in execution that the AMCs keep compressing what the actual value of that expertise is actually worth. So when you pull back inspections, it's like, well, this is all it's worth. It's worth $50.
Yeah.
I think that's the real problem.
Jonathan, we're getting some comments coming in from viewers, and I love this. Guys, keep sending your comments in. If you have questions, send us in a question. We'll start getting into those in just a minute. Believe it or not, Jonathan, we're already at the halfway mark. I mean, I don't know where the time's going, but we are actually at the halfway mark, and we've still got so much to talk about.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to talk real fast that nobody can understand us, kind of like that. So we definitely are going to have you back again really, really soon. I'd like to remind our viewers, this is the Appraisal Report webinar. My name is Bryan Reynolds, your host. Our special guest today is Mr. Jonathan Miller, and this is being brought to you by Appraiser eLearning. We have the free webinar, the Appraisal Report, the fourth Thursday of every month, and we'd like to welcome you in. The session's also being recorded, so if you'd like to go back and see any of our prior webinars, you're most welcome to do that. If you don't mind, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That will keep you in the know on a regular basis. So thank you for being here. Thanks for your participation. By the way, if you would like to be on the webinar, give us a call or send us an email. My email is brian@appraiserelearning.com. You can certainly reach out to me or Ben Maxwell. You can get him through support@appraiserelearning.com. Or if there's a special guest you would like for us to invite on the air, we would be certainly willing to do that. So reach out to us, tell us what you want to see, what you want to hear, and we'll do our best to get that on the free webinar. It's a good price, isn't it? So I'll get to some of these comments and questions in just a minute, but I want to read something. And Jonathan, this is something you wrote. At least I think it's something you wrote. So on June the 8th, I believe was the date, and this is in your housing notes, I believe you call it, and it's under a section called Appraiserville, and our viewers need to check this out because it's a lot of good stuff. And Jonathan said he devotes one day a week, right, to write that and publish that, and that's really a big deal. But you talked about appraisal waivers in that, and you said, in my view, they have been trying to entice lenders to better match their underwriter interpretation of risk with the actual risk out there. And then in the hybrid appraisal section, you said, you explain what that is, where they have a separate inspector rather than the appraiser. And then finally, you quote say, my takeaway is that there is no real data or precedent to base risk decisions on this new product at this time. And the biggest concern was the lack of standardization of separate inspectors for this product. And I think that just screams attention, because I think that's critical. And I would agree with you there. I have said, wouldn't it be nice, you'll see real estate brokerage firms where you'll have a broker that has 20 sales associates, or 30 or 40 or 50, and they're able to build that business model. And so many appraiser ran offices or appraisal offices, it's one person or maybe two people. And if you're an appraiser that would like to grow your business, you ought to have that ability. But my gosh, if you're making me do everything, I can only do so much myself in a day. I ought to be able to bring in associates or trainees or even non-trainees. So maybe this would be better served if we did have some sort of standardization, instead of having these clients reach out to a real estate professional, and there's good real estate professionals out there. There's some bad ones too.
Right.
But maybe, wouldn't it be nice if I could hire 2 or 3 people and put them through maybe specialized training?
Sure.
And I'm going to train you on how to measure a house. I'm going to train you in what to look at. And you're not going to be an appraiser. You're not even going to be an appraiser trainee. You're going to be an inspector, or maybe we call them observers, right? The observation of the property. I don't know. What's your thought on that? If there was some sort of standardization where you could bring people in, or maybe you outsource that. Maybe I create a company called Bryan's Observation Crew, and so you can hire my crew to go out.
That URL, get that website address. I understand your logic. It's just hard to imagine that, at least right now, when we still lenders, generally speaking, are push back on the use of trainees. So I can't. And here's the thing. This is what I was saying about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac embrace the use of trainees. They're completely fine.
Yes,
they have no objection. I don't know if they ever did.
Right.
But after the financial crisis, the lenders, some appraisers that you have one appraiser and 75 trainees running around, didn't know what they were doing. There was push, they didn't want a repeat of that. So they basically have banned trainees, which is, and I'm generalizing, I'm gonna say every bank has, but most banks, so most firms that had multiple appraisers and growing their practice with trainees don't have multiple appraisers anymore because they can't replace the ones that move on or whatever with new trainees. And that's because lenders credit has not normalized since the financial crisis.
Right.
So I find it that this is sort of the undercurrent of this whole discussion is credit. So the GSEs, which at the moment are making money, and it's sort of up in the air what's going to happen to them. Are they going to be spun off into the private sector, merged, and something new is created? Who knows? But it's kind of odd that we're having this hybrid appraisal discussion which is being initiated through Fannie Mae, when lenders themselves, Fannie Mae finds themselves pulling lenders to take more risk because lenders have overcompensated and credit conditions are, you see ads on TV for Quicken Loans and you just press a button to get a mortgage, but that's actually not what's happening. If you lift the hood up, it is, a sausage party, so to speak. There's just all kinds of machinations going on to sort of throttle and push that mortgage through. So we can have segmentation, and we probably will over time, but I'm not encouraged. I don't think the industry, if you don't want to sort of demean your worth to the mortgage process, I think at the moment, that's exactly what you end up doing.
Right. Hey, let's get to some of these questions and comments. Some of them are just comments, but I'm gonna fire through these, and we've got several, Jonathan. So let's try and give a real quick, concise answer if we can to some of these. Ted says, "Love the 2055, but AMCs didn't want to pay for them. They thought they were $175 and still do. I just received a request for one at the same price and declined." Scrappy says, is that his real name, Scrappy? The AMC,
cool.
I like it. The AMCs want the appraiser to physically inspect the property and take all comp photos. They will not allow someone we know and trust to do any of this. Now they want us to trust someone we don't know.
That's exactly the point I'm making, right? It's you have the trainee thing, but at the same time, let's not trust a trainee, but then let's trust somebody that we're blind to and don't have any idea what their qualifications are.
Absolutely.
That's the part that has to be worked out.
Yeah, and I think we need to shake up Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and maybe not just them, because as you said, they allow, Fannie Mae even says in their guidelines, an unlicensed person, in other words, a non-trainee, can do a significant portion or the entire appraisal, as long as the certified appraiser signs off and it's applicable under state law. And sometimes that's not applicable
Sure.
under state law. But where I live, I'm from Kentucky, and we are a voluntary state, so that would be actually applicable. They have to still be competent. Melissa said, so I guess hypothetical conditions and extraordinary assumptions all over the place, question mark.
So I don't think that gives you a pass from liability, at least from what I've understood. And here's the thing is, we can get really mired down on hot buttons like hybrids and evaluations because, hey, who's going to do it better than us, right? We're the expert in valuation. There's a lot of talent out there. I think, and this maybe takes us in a different direction, but I really think that we're barking up the wrong tree. That I think that appraisers, and maybe it's because I'm in New York and I'm not in a homogeneous housing market. Like if you look at aerial photos of Phoenix and you look at, as far as the eye can see, subdivisions where the homes are exactly the same.
Sure.
Some of these products are going to be more relevant to them, to the markets like that. So this discussion should be tailor-made to the type of market you serve. That's number one.
I agree.
The number two thing here is the title of this webinar is Alternatives to Traditional Appraisals. I would contend you should rename it Alternatives to Traditional Appraisal Practice. In other words, you should, as an appraiser now, there's going to be, okay, so you look at the waiver of appraisals, and we can, we're agreement, we can rant about it all day long, but they're there. So why not offer a service to buyers of these homes to help them decide, like your example you gave, I think, earlier, where you work for an all-cash buyer, but they wanted an appraisal because they wanted to feel comfortable. Right. Why not market that?
Absolutely.
Why not? I think that's going to be huge. Just in general, for appraisers, maybe not in homogenous markets,
right?
But in the vast majority of other markets. I think the other thing that we should really be thinking about is, as alternatives to your practice, is get out there. In other words, I think most appraisers, and I'm stereotyping it because I definitely was one of those, and this is a dated comment, but we just wait for the fax machine to ring. Like, hey, there's an order coming.
Right.
And then when you don't get as many as you thought, over the month, you call them up and say, hey, what gives, right? Why not be more proactive? And there's a couple of appraisers I always shill for them just because I'm so amazed at what they've done. They do private work almost primarily. And I have to tell you, with my firm, in 2008, I stopped doing retail mortgage work because it was going AMC. It was becoming, you were becoming a widget as opposed to a professional. And I switched to private work. And since 2008, I can tell you that including 2008, every year, so it's been a decade, as you said, since the financial crisis, 8 out of the 10 years have been a record year for my practice.
Good for you. Good for you.
And it's all because I changed my client base.
Right.
I think every appraiser's mission in life, unless you like doing, mortgage, retail mortgage work, should be to find people that actually appreciate your expertise, and they will pay for it. And no matter what you think, they are out there in droves.
Absolutely. That's why I like doing court work, because you're really trying to solve the problem. You're trying to solve the value problem. You don't have, typically there's pressure in everything, but typically the same amount or it's a different type of pressure. But, I wrote an article many years ago, and it's hard to get your head around this, but I encourage appraisers to go out and seek new business when you're busy.
Yes.
And that's an interesting concept, because folks say, well, I'm too busy to handle what I've got.
They're slow, and everybody else is slow too. So.
That's right. If you're slow, everybody's out there trying to get new business. But if you're busy, probably everyone's busy and people aren't knocking on those doors. So doesn't it make sense to go out and seek a good client? And when you secure that good client, you fire one of your best. If you've never fired a client,
right,
do it. You'll be glad you did. So, hey, some more questions real quick, Jonathan. Sure. Melissa P says, what's the difference in fee? We're not going to really talk fees. Freddie asked, what do you mean by hybrid? And, we're talking about kind of like a desktop appraisal where someone else, kind of a combination of desktop drive-by, but you as the appraiser aren't doing the drive-by. So most of the clients will hire a real estate agent to go do the drive-by. They'll send that information to you, Freddie, and then you're using that information in addition to public records, private records, in order to develop your opinion. So I apologize for not doing a better job on that earlier. So one person says here that they use a 360-degree video camera with our apprentices, and it's great. That's an idea.
That's very cool.
Rick says, why not have the field inspector provide videos of the property along with the property photos? Think outside the box. I don't know. Maybe that's
Well, I think the idea of video and multiple images taken is all helpful. One of the things that I find with our industry, and the think outside of the box, which is the most overused phrase in the history of mankind, yet it's actually useful. And I'll give you scenarios that I've gone through over the last, say, decade. Is there are weird niches in your market that there's weird, you're hearing a sound. There's some weird niches in your product niches in your market that you don't even realize. So this is going to sound weird just because it doesn't apply to almost any of your listeners, but I think I am the best dumbwaiter air shaft appraiser in the world. Now, what is a dumbwaiter air shaft?
I know exactly what that is.
So we appraise a lot of co-op apartments in Manhattan, and we appraise raw, unused space that owners want to incorporate into their apartment. Hallway space, roof space, basement space. That doesn't apply to single-family home appraiser in Arizona, like I said, but it's unbelievable what the niches that you don't even realize. So when I go to different forums or different conferences, you'll always see people that specialize in something, and it's something you just can't even imagine there being a market for it, but it is. There's so much more. The more specific you are in your expertise, the more valuable you are. The more generalized you are, the more it's about the fee. And you're a widget. And I just think this is a long-term sort of change in thinking of our profession, because I'm sure there's a lot of opportunities out there. You discover by getting out there, as I was starting to say, these two appraisers that I've always humped on my housing notes, Ryan Lindquist of Sacramento Appraisal Blog, and Tom Horn at Birmingham Appraisal Blog as well. They're talking to the brokerage community every week. They have a blog every week. They have engagement with the community, and they live on private appraisals and make a good living.
Listen, I had never been a real estate agent. That was a bad word. It used to be that appraisers and agents hated each other, and I don't know, maybe they still do. But that shifted. The love-hate relationship kind of shifted between them folks to appraisers and underwriters, and then it kind of now is probably appraisers and AMCs. I think that's fair. But what's interesting to me, and I've learned a lot. I got my real estate license a couple of years ago, and I'll be honest, I've learned a lot. I've enjoyed it. I'm still an appraiser at heart, and that's what I do. But I do some real estate, and what's interesting to me, and this isn't, I'm not picking on real estate agents, but what's very interesting, Jonathan, is that a lot of agents have no idea how to help a client list a house.
Right.
And so it's a huge opportunity for appraisers. Go into some of those local offices and be their guest speaker at their sales meeting.
Totally productive time.
You could do an oral appraisal report. Face it, we get paid for two things: our time and our knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The more time I spend on a project, the more I'm going to charge. So the less time, it makes sense. It's probably going to be a lesser amount.
Yeah.
You could do an oral appraisal report. You could do a restricted appraisal report. You're helping an agent price a property accordingly. I know every appraiser out there watching have appraised properties before where they've seen a purchase take place and the seller is leaving money on the table. And that's
right.
Because you had an uninformed seller, maybe guided by an agent. I don't know. Hey, we're almost out of time, and there's one other topic that I want to bring up, and
sure.
I'm gonna share my screen if I know how to do this. And some appraisers may have heard of this and they may not have. So I want to put this up on the screen and then I'll kind of get your take on it, Jonathan, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So let me see if I can do this correctly. Can you see not
yes.
me on my screen now?
I can. Yes.
Okay. So guys, I've got an announcement from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. And you can see on this announcement here, it says that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will update the appraisal data set and what? And the forms. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so they've got this announcement. I'm not going to read it all. You can get on eFannie Mae and look for it yourself. But what's interesting is this little sentence here. I don't know if it's highlighting on the screen or not. It says this work is designated to provide greater clarity to lenders, borrowers, investors, simplify the appraisal reporting and reviewing, and build a foundation for appraisal modernization. Now, they give a timeline down here. All right. It says they've begun conversations with appraisal software form vendors, and in the coming months will engage lenders and appraisers.
Yes.
I've said forever, number one, we need a new form. In fact, I asked at the Appraisal Summit and Expo last November in Las Vegas. I'm surprised they didn't throw me out of that thing. I asked Freddie Mac, the representative from Freddie Mac. I said, when is the last time that a loan has ever been denied based upon what the bathroom wainscot is? And I don't know if there's ever been a loan denied based on what the bathroom wainscot is. Could we take that off the stinking form? I mean, we've got a 6-page form now and a lot of addenda, and yet
there's only 800 fields.
Yeah,
literally
that's all.
800
that's
fields.
All. So the timeline you see on there says in the first quarter of 2018, planning, stakeholder engagement. In the second quarter, you can see that if I jump all the way down the list here, it says implementation planning to be announced, and that's at least in the third quarter of 2019. Right. So appraisers, yell at Fannie Mae, see if you can get involved. It would be wonderful if a group of appraisers could come together and sit at the planning table with Fannie Mae. And
we've actually already seen FHFA start to reach out to the coalitions. There's 27 state coalitions. I'm part of the New York coalition that are being engaged by FHFA, which is encouraging. Just a sidebar note. So for me, the word modernization to me is code for AMC. And widgetizing. So I always, when I see that, my sort of my spidey sense sort of starts tingling that I'm worried a little worried about it. But at least we're seeing more transparency than I think has ever been seen. At least initially, I don't know how their appetite if it will continue. But it's good. It's good to see appraisers being engaged in the process, and we'll see how it evolves.
You know, I encourage appraisers to get involved. Go to a dang conference, for crying out loud. You know, I got a chance to talk to Julie Jones with Fannie Mae.
Yeah, so did I.
Zach was there. I mean, you know, you get to talk to these folks, and how often do you rub elbows with these folks or see them? Jim Park was in Nashville at the conference we had there back in April, and so I encourage you, get out, get involved. You can make a difference. Here, Fannie Mae is saying they're looking for input from appraisers, and
they actually are, and you can see it. Even you know, I also spoke to Julie at Fannie, and I also spoke to Scott Reuter as the chief appraiser for Freddie, and it's just a whole different mindset. One other just quick plug, just to answer your question about getting involved and listening is. I'm involved in a conference this early November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in San Antonio called Appraiser Fest.
Okay, great.
And it is it's pretty amazing. The website gives you the content, but it's an appraiser oriented conference to talk about just these kinds of issues. It's pretty exciting.
Very good. Very good. Well, my friend, we are at the 1 hour mark. I can't believe it went by this quick. I could spend the whole afternoon speaking to you.
Likewise, it was fun. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here once again and the time that you kind of etched out for us, because I know you're a very, very busy man and well sought after. Jonathan, if anybody wanted to reach out to you and pick your brain, or maybe want to, I guess I should call you Professor now.
Yes, I'm respectable now, finally.
If they would like to reach out to Professor Miller, how can they get in touch with you or see what's going on with you?
So there's two ways. One is my website, which is millersamuel.com. Lots of information, how to sign up for the housing notes, and just my email, which is jmiller for Jonathan Miller, jmiller@millersamuel.com.
Thank you very much again, Jonathan. We will certainly be having you back on the program again. I would like to remind everybody this is the Appraisal Report webinar, a free webinar brought to you by Appraiser eLearning. We bring this to you monthly, and not trying to sell you anything. We're trying to give you information. We are appraisers. We care about the profession. We want to make a difference. We want to make things better. You know, we really spend a lot of time with appraisers. I do a lot of instruction, both live, and we have the online format. We just hope you remember us sometime when you need some education. But until next time, guys, be safe out there. Have a great week, great weekend, and we'll see you again next month. Thanks again, Jonathan.
You bet.